hi. I have some friends who are actual beekeepers and that. So, anybody else beekeepers in the crowd? Anybody bee-havers? There's a difference and a distinction, but we won't really get into that right now. Sorry. That's all right. Come on in. Okay, there we go. Sharing space. Have any of you had any experience with beekeeping, anything like that, or just kind of first time want to know what it's about? Because I know you do, of course. Okay. Well, beekeeping is actually an art. It's a science, an art, a sport at times if you find yourself having to outrun things, but that doesn't really happen very often, so it's not a problem. But it is absolutely fascinating, and we love it. We went from having just one hive 3 years ago. We now have 24 hives. It's basically a part-time job at this point, but we absolutely love it. So some of the things that you need to get into beekeeping and get started: bees for one, a box in which to put them, frames and all that. When you buy your beekeeping equipment, it's beautiful and white and brand new, and after about a year of using it, it tends to get a little character, we'll call it. Not dirt, but character. Your gloves, which were once nice and supple calf leather, I don't know if you can hear that very well, but it's propolis is what you get on it. It's very, very sticky stuff, and it's really interesting stuff as well. The bees don't have an internal immune system, and so they coat everything with this wonderful sticky substance called propolis right here. And this is actually antimicrobial, antifungal. It's got all sorts of amazing, amazing healing properties to it. You can take it as a tincture, different things like that, apply it on wounds, all sorts of things, but it's really, really good for it. A little bit of everything, so good stuff. One of the things that people don't really understand or know that the bees actually produce, and that's the propolis. They know about the honey, they know about the wax, but that propolis is one thing. It's kind of the unsung hero of the hive, so really good stuff. Now, get started in beekeeping. Like we said, you need bees, you need a box, you need frames. So you have the box, and you can see my sweetheart little assistant here. She's going to be demonstrating some things. So we start with just a bare frame, and we can pass this around if you want. Start with a bare frame, and that's just wooden foundation. It's a plastic sheet covered in beeswax, and that has a stencil imprinted on it, and that gives them kind of a little bit of an idea of where we're drawing our frames and things like that. After anywhere from a few days to a week, they will actually draw out the wax. Now, if I pass this around, I'm going to ask you to be really careful. Don't crush it this way. It takes the bees a lot of time and energy to make this, so just handle it by the wood if you wouldn't mind. You'll notice there's a little bit of that propolis right here. We didn't cut it off so you guys could see that. Don't get that on your hands. It won't come off very easily. You actually need rubbing alcohol to get that off, so if you get sticky, we've got a wet rag over at the other booth. Now this one I won't pass around for several reasons. One, as you can tell, this bee is trying to get after it. But two, this thing weighs about 12 pounds. So if you want to come up afterwards and feel kind of what a full frame of honey feels like, it's pretty substantial. There's quite a lot of honey in there. I set it down on the grass, so we've got that. Who knows what honey is made out of? Any questions? What goes into it? Okay, pollen is... Okay, all right. So pollen is one of the things from a flower that the bees will get, and that's what they use for their protein. And they actually mix it with honey with something called bee bread. Really good nutritive substance if you ever need to eat something with a lot of protein in it. But honey is actually made from nectar. So they'll go out to the trees and the flowers. How many of you ever sucked on a honeysuckle as a kid? You remember that? Ever done that? That kind of sweet taste? They'll actually go and collect as much of that liquid as they possibly can, put it into these cells, and that's what these cells are, you can see. They'll put it into the cells, and then they'll actually beat their wings over it and evaporate it until it's about 17% water. And once it's completely evaporated, afterwards, if you want to come up, you're welcome to. You can see, actually, I'll show this side. You can see here, use my little pointer, right here we have open honey, okay? That is yet to be capped, because once the bees deem it honey, they'll cap it over with a layer of wax, and that's like sealing it in a mason jar. That's like canning for them, okay? And it will stay good for years. They actually, when they exhumed King Tut's tomb, they found still edible honey. Okay, so we know it's got a shelf life of at least 2,000 plus years, so it's pretty good. Really good for food storage in that state. So as long as you keep it dry, that's the one thing. If you don't, if water is introduced, you can actually run the risk of getting botulism, which is no fun. Really bad for you. But they'll cap it with this wax, and there's two types of cappings that we see. So we actually have both examples here. You see this dark band right here. That's where the wax is touching the honey. We call that wet cap honey. And then this little bit wider, there's a little bit of a gap. So there's a little bit of air in between there. We call that dry cap honey. There's no difference between it in taste or composition, anything like that, texture. No difference in any way, shape, or form. It's just what it looks like. So where that comes in is we'll do cut comb sometimes, where we'll actually cut a section of this comb out and sell that as just a big chunk. For some odd reason, people like buying the dry cap over the wet cap. I don't know why. It just looks different. But years and years ago, that was the only way to make sure that your honey was pure, was because this is the original no tamper seal, so to speak, from nature. Okay, the bees will cap that. There's no way to fake that, you know, the honey is not honey, because people would stretch it with water, sugar water, caro syrup, all sorts of stuff, and it wouldn't be full honey. And so this was the way that they were able to assure that it was true, complete, and total honey. So there is that. Now, how do you get the honey out of the comb and into your beautiful little jar like we have here? There's a number of different ways. There's the scrape and strain method, where you just take a spoon, a sieve, and a bucket, and you scrape all of that nice hard work those bees have done with the wax. They are loving this, so I'm actually going to cover it. I'm going to cover this because they're getting a little over enthusiastic here. So what we will do, you can, like I said, you can scrape it, put it into a strainer, but the problem is, like I said, it takes those bees a lot of effort to make that wax. It actually takes roughly 10 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. And for each hive you have, for each frame, each one of those frames has about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of wax. So you get 10 frames of that. That's over 200 pounds of honey just to make that wax. So you can see how we, you know, that wax frame is kind of a precious commodity for us for a little while. But what we will do, so we don't want to crush and strain. That's that method. It's a viable method, but that's not something that for like keeping it going year after year, subsistence beekeeping, we don't want to do that, because we basically, if I put a whole frame, where's that empty frame? If I put a whole hive of those empty frames in, okay, it'll take them 2 to 3 weeks to draw out a whole box, versus if I put a whole frame or a whole box of those in, I can have 2 boxes full of honey with for the same amount of energy that they would have to build that wax and then start putting honey in it. And so it just puts it that much further ahead. So another way, and the way that we usually like to do it, and I can pass this book around, pardon it, it's probably going to be a little sticky. This back tab right here, if you guys want to look at that, you can see the cutting those cappings off. So we take a hot knife, cut the cappings off, both sides, put it into an extractor and spin it. And thank you, sweetheart. My wonderful assistant, my son Ethan, he's actually our apprentice beekeeper this year. He's got his own hive and everything. He's helping us extract, so doing a pretty good job. So even a child can do it. So simple, a child can do it. But like I said, there is so much to it. So there's that. So then after we've cut that wax off, we spin it. The honey drips down the sides, and then we extract it from there. And then we just run it through a strainer and put it straight in a jar. And once again, put the lid on, keep it dry. It'll stay for years. Yes?
So what's the extractor like? Do you purchase the extractor?
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
There's a couple different options. The question was, what is the extractor like? Typically, it's it's just a round device with some places to put the frames in, and it'll spin. They have them motorized, they have hand crank, all sorts of different things. There are services and people that own their own extractors that you can actually take your frames to. They'll extract the honey and do it for either a price or a cut of the honey or the wax. Just kind of depends on their operation. Some places go by the pound, if we'll do so much per pound or so much per frame to extract it for you. Or you can do your own and get your own. But if you have just one hive, it makes more sense to have someone else do that, because that's a pretty substantial piece of equipment, and it's a pretty substantial price as well. They start at $400 to $600 for one of these extractors, unless you luck out and find one at a yard sale. Someone was telling me they saw one at a yard sale for $25, and I was upset I wasn't there. One of the other things, and I had mentioned before, honey isn't just good for food. It has wonderful curative properties. A few years ago, my daughter got a second-degree burn off of the bottom of a bee smoker, of all things. But first thing we did, slapped some honey on it, wrapped it in cellophane, and within 2 days it was completely fine. Completely cured. No scar, no nothing. I actually had a pretty nasty third-degree burn on my hand here a couple years ago, and a combination of beeswax, honey, comfrey, different things like that, and a salve actually doesn't look as bad as it would have had I treated it with what they told me to treat it with. So as far as a medicine box, you ever get a bee sting? Just take a daub of honey, stick it on it. It won't swell in any way, shape, or form. It's pretty neat. So they've got all sorts of neat things. Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am. Do we have antibiotics in our honey? We don't add anything to our honey. We don't heat it. We don't filter it. And so what we do, like I said before, I don't know if you were here at the very beginning, but the propolis is one of the things that, thank you, propolis is one of the materials that the bees make, and they actually put that in the hive themselves, and that is their antibiotic, so to speak, and that is their external immune system. And so if, propolis is an absolutely fantastic material, I have. Some people will feed antibiotics in sugar water and that to their bees. The problem that we run into there, those bees are now not able to fight off certain infections on their own. So we essentially have drug-addicted bees at that point. Yeah. Any other questions? That was a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, no, please.
You're very calm with those bees all buzzing around.
Yep, you have to be. Yeah.
So it's you. How do you train your bees to not be? Well, this was exciting right there.
Yep, they're pretty excited about the honey right here.
Yeah. So how do you handle bees? What hints do you have?
Well, hints, safety equipment is number one. Number two, maintain your calm. Keep your composure. If you start swatting at them and that, they'll, bees are defensive. That's the main difference between bees and wasps. Bees are constructive. They pollinate, they generate honey. They're very reluctant to sting because they'll actually die if they sting. Wasps are just jerks. They'll sting, they can sting multiple times. They don't really need a whole lot of provocation. They're just rude. They're not very nice in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, they're kind of bullies. What was your question?
There is any regulations, permits, or anything like that?
Yes, yeah, the state asks that if you have beehives that you have a state license to be a beekeeper. And it's, I think, $10 a year for 1 to 10 hives, so it's really not that much. You just send them a check and fill out a piece of paper saying, I have this many hives, and you're good. Mm-hmm. Ideally, I mean, the state wants you to have it so they can track who has bees where and that, so, yeah. I'm supposed to answer that way. How many bees are in a hive? It can depend. So in a standard box like this, 2 deep, you can have upwards of 60,000 bees in a hive. Right now at home, we have one hive that's, 5 boxes deep? Yeah, so do the math on that, and you can see exponentially how many there are. Yes, sir? Our neighbors love that we have bees. We bring them honey all the time. They're garden triples in what it puts out. The first year we had bees, we had 6 Roma tomato plants. We got 90 pounds of tomatoes off of them. They were this tall before they flowered, and they were this tall when they were fruited because they were all hung over with fruit. So we're on a 1/4 acre lot, and so we've got 3 hives right now, and then in an out yard we've got another 20 hives. So, yeah. Yes?
Where do you get the bees initially when you start?
There's a number of different places you can get the bees. You can find and trap wild swarms. Other people, bee havers, like I said earlier, who just put bees in a box and don't take care of them, those bees will swarm, so half of the hive will leave. And if you're quick enough or know where they are or people call you, you can actually go and get that swarm, put it in a box and take them home for yourself. Or you can call a local beekeeping company and you can actually buy bees by the pound. In packages, and so you can get 2 to 3 pound packages, or what are most typical. If you, yeah, and the queen comes with it usually, yeah, in the swarm or the other way around. If you are going to get into beekeeping, there's 2 ways to get bee. Well, 3. You can trap a wild swarm, that can take a while. Plus, there's a lot of us beekeepers out competing for them too, so you have to beat us to them first, which is tricky because we're pretty plugged into it. The other way you can do it, and what I would suggest, you can buy the packages and the box of bees with an empty frames and that. My biggest suggestion, if you're going to get into beekeeping, start with 2 hives and start with nucleus hives, or nukes, we call them for short, okay? You call a beekeeper, make sure you call in the wintertime or before, because if you call in the spring to early summer, it's going to be too late. People buy so many of them, they don't have any, right? It's kind of hard, right? When you guys were getting them, they were almost on empty.
We reserved ours before Christmas.
Yeah, yeah.
This year, it's our first year booking, and it's awesome.
It is a lot of fun.
It's the coolest hobby.
Yeah, and you get all sorts of benefits from it. But if you are going to start in beekeeping, my advice: I started with 1, and I didn't do a package, or I did do a package, not a nuke. Very difficult getting started because I had a box of bees, and I pick up a frame and I go, I think they're doing okay, and put them back in. But when you have 2, you can lift one up and go, wow, these guys are doing great. Ooh, these guys aren't doing so good. And you can kind of tell when something's up, when something's wrong. If you need to move, a frame of brood or eggs to the other one to kind of help them out number-wise, there's different ways of doing that. Yes, sir. Startup, you can be anywhere between $200 to $500, just depending on what the setup is, how many bees you're getting. The equipment, you just get once, as long as you get it. Our family motto is buy it right once, I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw there was this gentleman had made paper bee suits. And I kind of said, no, I'm good. He says, well, do you want to buy them? Will you sell these for me? No, I'm not going to sell something I don't believe in or wouldn't use. So get it right once. Do your research. Find a good company. One of the best local places you can get bees, beekeeping equipment, classes and things like that is the Honey Company. Stan and Alicia Moulton run it. And they're actually 4th generation beekeepers right here in Provo. Absolutely wonderful people. They're really great. Very, very good.
They have tons of free classes.
Yeah.
They teach you everything that you need to know. You can get a lot of your equipment from them or with recommendations from them. They're fantastic to work with.
Yeah.
Super nice. Answer any questions that you have.
Yeah. So the honeycompany.com, if you want to write that down, that'll take you to their website. They've got a blog there, lots of different informations. Actually, you might know them, right? I know. This is the 3rd generation beekeeper right here. So, really great company. They're not in it just to make a buck. They're actually in it to actually teach you how to be a successful beekeeper on your own. They want healthy bees and they want good beekeepers out there, and that's really what their setup is. Yes.
If you're trying to grab swarms,
Uh-huh.
are you worried? Because I heard that the beehives are dying because of tapping into genetically changed plants.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so if you try to grab a swarm that's wild, whatever, how do you protect your hives from dying out? Since that's such a problem in the United States.
Well, just getting you're not going to put your hive with another hive. You'll have them in a different area and different things like that. So there's different steps that you can take to protect your bees from that. Yeah. Did you have a question? And then
It's actually about that colony collapse. How do you protect the bees? How do you essentially maintain and not lose your hard work?
be a beekeeper and not a bee haver. A beekeeper goes through their hives, makes sure they have what they need, make sure they're healthy. A bee haver has bees in a box and doesn't ever check them. And that's where a lot of our problems are coming from and things like that. So, yeah. Yes?
Why
Reproduction rate. So on this frame, a queen bee can fill one of these frames front and back in what, 2-3 days? Yeah. She can lay 2,500 eggs a day. And those eggs will take, well, let's see, depends on the bee, but 21 days, so about 3 weeks to go from an egg to a bee. And it depends if it's a drone or a queen. They have different gestation rates, but for the most part. So the queen, all she does day in and day out is lay eggs. 2,500 eggs a day on average, 365 days a year if your temperatures permit. They don't permit here. Usually they stop at around fall in the winter time, so they'll slow down. So
If she's filling them all with eggs, then where are they filling them?
that's where being a beekeeper and not a beehaver comes in. So when you have a new hive, you'll start and you'll have 9 to 10 frames per box. You want to put on a new box when they're about 80% drawn out. And drawn out means they've got comb, they've got eggs, they've got honey started. Once they're just about out of space, you want to add another box. If you add it before then, they kind of get disillusioned and overwhelmed, and they'll kind of go, oh man, it's a lot to do. And they'll kind of slow down for a little while. So you want proper management, keep an eye on them, make sure that you're giving them space when they need it. Okay, did that answer your question? No? We'll chat afterwards, because I think we're about out of time.
Any
Okay.
other questions? Maybe one more question?
And we'll be back at our booth back here in the back corner for a little while too. So if you have any other questions, please come back. We'll happily chat with you.
Do you sell any honey?
We do sell honey. We can't sell it here, but my kids will be out on Carterville Road tonight selling honey. So you've seen it.
Yep, I bought it. It's very good, very good.